Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose, and more Xbox Activision Blizzard updates are on the way. I know, who would have guessed, right? But we are moving into what is expected to be the final months before we start to hear finalized decisions from places like the EU and then also the CMA. However, and here's the thing, Sony has other things in mind, as they reportedly made at least one last-ditch effort to lobby these regulators into blocking the buyout. Yeah, it's always something, isn't it? I know one thing, though. In all honesty, despite what happens, I'm ready to get some official answers soon. This really has just kind of turned into a political circus by this point. Beyond all that, though, something else that's happening is that we are seeing some movement by Nintendo that may point to an incoming Nintendo Direct. So that one should be pretty exciting, and just overall, we do have a lot to get into today. But before we start, a little reminder on those buttons below. It would be very much appreciated if you hit that subscribe and bell button. Come and hang out with me on a daily basis. I am here every Monday through Friday, and occasionally on the weekends as well. With that said, though, let's just jump right into things, starting off with a new Ubisoft leak. It feels like recently it's just been bad news for Ubisoft, but today I come bearing good news, or at least for you Far Cry fans out there. This is coming from Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson, which claims that his sources have revealed not one, but two new Far Cry games are on the way. One being a single-player game codenamed Project Blackbird. This is more than likely Far Cry 7. And then the other is a standalone multiplayer game mode codenamed Maverick. Now, apparently, these two games were originally developed as one grand package, but early on, Ubisoft decided to go ahead and split the two up and ship them separately. I mean, you know, that's kind of typical modern development anymore. It's very rare to get single-player and multiplayer games shipped together. But what's kind of interesting about this is that we do know some information about Maverick, the multiplayer game. Insider Gaming said they understand that the game is pitched as being set in the Alaskan wilderness and is currently an extraction-based shooter with mechanics such as permadeath, a backpack system, contracts, and more. And this not only is interesting in the sense that, yeah, you do have some early details about its multiplayer, but on top of that, just considering this mode was originally meant to be a part of Far Cry 7, the idea here is that the next mainline Far Cry game could also be set in the Alaskan wilderness. I think that would actually be kind of cool if that is the case, and I think it would also fit into Far Cry's gameplay. One other thing that was mentioned here, though, is that they are ditching the Dunia engine that they've used on past Far Cry games in favor of the Snowdrop engine, which has yielded Ubisoft with some great results in games like The Division as an example. Regardless, one way or the other, don't expect these games to be out anytime soon. We're probably still about 2 to 3 years away at the very least. Now, earlier this week, we of course got the Xbox Developer Direct, and I thought that they did an overall phenomenal job with it. It was probably Xbox's best digital showcase in terms of format, and I do hope that we see more of these in the future. But there was one thing that really kind of stood out, and that was the lack of a concrete release date for Forza Motorsport. Previously, Microsoft said that it was targeting the first half of 2023, but with them still not committing to an exact release date, you can probably understand why that is now in doubt. Well, about that, the often leaky Jeff Grubb on his Game Mess podcast said this: "What I'm hearing, I'm feeling pretty great about this after asking around a couple of times after hearing about it the first time earlier today. It does seem like Forza is going to slip later into the year and probably won't be the first half of the year." Now, he did later on clarify by saying this on Twitter: "I think the actual release is still fluctuating, but don't be surprised if it ends up missing the first half." So there it is, and honestly, I don't think most of us will be overly surprised by this. I mean, as soon as they didn't nail down an exact release date at the Developer Direct, as I said the other day, I just kind of assumed that, yeah, it's probably going to miss that original target. Now, I know some people might be disappointed about that and everything, but, I mean, at the same time, it sounds like it's still on track for this year, and based on some of the footage that we've seen, it definitely looks like the wait will be well worth it. I think by this point, though, just kind of expect it to maybe slip out a little bit. It could end up being some type of summer release, maybe July or August, maybe even September. I think this would end up making a pretty good summer game. Now, actually, speaking of Xbox, we might as well go ahead and talk about Activision Blizzard, because there's actually been a few different updates over the last few days. You know, as always, if there's anything interesting happening, I try to keep you all updated as much as I possibly can, and in this case, there's two different things happening. One is in regards to the FTC, and then the other is, interestingly enough, coming from Sony. Yeah, we'll get into that here in just a moment, but first, we'll talk about the FTC, because according to a Bloomberg report, it says the FTC reportedly filed its complaint a matter of hours after U.S. and European Union officials held a call about their investigations into the deal. During the call, the European Union regulators said they plan to start discussions with Microsoft about a settlement. It's then claimed that the FTC filed their lawsuit in an attempt to quote-unquote get out in front of the Europeans in an effort to shape the narrative. So, okay, basically what happened here is that this apparently prompted the FTC to speed up their process because they wanted to try and pressure the EU into not accepting a settlement. A settlement from the EU would majorly hurt the FTC's case, so the FTC does not want the EU to have discussions with Microsoft about a settlement. As we all know, the FTC didn't sit down with Microsoft about concessions, which is another reason that their legal case looks weak. The EU, though, on the other hand, is going about it in a much better way. They are following a process which is probably what the FTC should have done as well. Instead, I think the FTC have increasingly made themselves look bad, and I think that they have increasingly made their case weaker, just as they did here, because day by day it becomes more and more evident that this is just one big political game for them. They don't want big tech mergers. So here we are. It's that simple. They're not trying to abide by the law. Instead, they're trying to make an example out of this acquisition in the hopes they can change the law. So in other words, they're not currently abiding the law as it stands. And one big problem with that is that they're going to need to form some alliances with these other big regulators, but it doesn't really seem like they're on the same page here at all. The EU wants to go over concessions with Microsoft to see if they can reach some type of an agreement, which is something that the FTC does not want. Interestingly enough, though, something else that's happening here is that the EU is sending their statement of objections to Microsoft. We did learn about this before, but Ida's over on Resetera, which does have a legal background. He's done a phenomenal job just kind of breaking down this case, but he believes that their statement of objections was sent today, meaning that they can move to the next step of the process, which is working on concessions. Now, as long as they're not overly demanding, as long as Microsoft finds them to be reasonable, we could see some prompt actions by Microsoft to alleviate any concerns the EU may have. If that is to happen, then the EU will likely approve the buyout, maybe possibly soon. And in fact, Idis did say that he believes that it's very likely going through in Europe. UK is a bit of a mystery, but I think that it will be approved there too. So, I mean, the overall process does seem to be going fine in Europe, but the story doesn't quite end there, because another report by Reuters revealed Sony's Jim Ryan visited the EU once again, where he tried to make his case about why this acquisition is more or less bad and why it should be blocked. Now, the thing is that he's already done this before, but I'd say with the timing of all of this, it kind of sounds, or at least to me, it kind of sounds like he wanted to be heard before those statement of objections were sent out. Again, this is a big part of the process, so he wanted to meet up before that. Now, as to what they discussed, though, Idis posted this. MLEX has a brief report about this meeting. Different executives from Sony met Verstager. Sony's delegation was led by Jim Ryan. Sony pressed their case for a block. Same old arguments. Microsoft could withhold Call of Duty from other consoles or platforms. Microsoft might degrade how Call of Duty works with other gaming platforms. You know, this is really just the same tired Call of Duty argument coming out again, which is honestly moot by this point. Microsoft has already offered Sony a 10-year contract. They offered the same contract to Steam. They also came to an agreement with Nintendo, but hey, I guess we're just going to go ahead and ignore all that stuff. But hey, I guess we're just going to go with the same disingenuous argument in the hopes for a block. I don't imagine that regulators are going to fall for it by this point, considering the evidence is already out there. If this is Sony's best argument, though, Microsoft will easily offer this concession to the EU and just be done with it. As they've said time and time again, their goal is to have Call of Duty on more platforms, not less. Either way, there you go though, but really my main takeaway from all of this is that we should start to see some more meaningful updates very soon. Microsoft once again said on Tuesday that they do still expect the deal to close on fiscal year 2023 being June 30th. So we should start to see some big movement over the next few months. And I'd say with those statement of objections, concessions could actually come sooner rather than later. And if the EU does approve it, we might also see a bit of a domino effect with other regulators as well. Let's go talk about Nintendo, though, because pretty much as soon as 2023 started, there's been a lot of speculation about a looming Nintendo Direct. I mean, honestly, it's not really hard to fathom the idea that a Nintendo Direct will happen in the first few months of the year. Historically, Nintendo seems to like February Directs. And plus, I mean, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is right around the corner. You know, they do have to show this game eventually because we still know next to nothing about it. So again, it's not necessarily hard to assume a Nintendo Direct is coming relatively soon. But there is some movement by Nintendo that might further confirm some of the speculation out there. It was discovered that Nintendo recently updated software IDs on the Canadian eShop for both Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and also Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. Yeah, it's been a little while since we've heard much about that game, but with Nintendo updating their software IDs, this potentially could point to Nintendo preparing to allow pre-orders for both of these games, which in return could mean that announcements are rather soonish. One thing that I do kind of find interesting about all this, though, is that there's not just a software update for Zelda. That has kind of been a question. Yes, we think that a Nintendo Direct is coming just based off of what history has told us, but the question is, will it only be for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, or will they instead announce other things as well? So with that in mind, I think this here is good news that it might be more of a general Direct with multiple game announcements, including a release date for Advance Wars. Hey, who knows if this really is a general Direct? Maybe we'll finally hear about the much-rumored Metroid Prime remake, maybe one day. But either way, this is the first real evidence that a Nintendo Direct is coming, hopefully in February, but no guarantees just yet. Of course, I will let you all know as soon as we hear more. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, and with the Dead Space remake launching today, this is potentially the biggest game release for the year thus far. So I wanted to ask you all, will you be playing Dead Space Remake this weekend? And as you can see here, 40% of you all being the majority said that you're going to wait for a discount, 38% of you said no, and then 17% of you said yes. I am actually going to be in that 17% as well. I'm very much looking forward to playing Dead Space Remake. That's exactly what I'm going to do as soon as I post this video. We are talking about one of the all-time great horror games. I'm definitely ready to jump in. However, it definitely seems like a lot of you all still have a problem with that $70 asking price. This is one of those premium $70 games, and on top of that, it is a remake, so some of you all have played that original, of course, and it just seems like that's a little bit of a high price for some of you all out there, and I do completely understand that. While I do personally love remakes myself, I do kind of understand the sentiment that some people have, where they would prefer to put that $70 for a brand new game that they've never ever played before. So I do completely understand that. Nonetheless, though, I mean, this game is reviewing extremely well. It sounds like it's better than ever before. So yeah, I'm with the 17% here. I'm very, very much looking forward to playing this one actually right now. So with that said, that's it for this episode. But if you like the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.